All right, my friends, welcome back to Salt City Counseling. Once again, my name's Scott. I'm a licensed therapist here in the beautiful state of Utah. Beautiful fall day out there. Beautiful. This is the first video I've made in close to a month. I got sick, man. I was sick. I'm still not feeling 100%. I just feel laggy. I just feel tired. I think I may have gotten COVID. I didn't test myself. Frankly, I I don't I don't like giving in to the COVID hysteria whatsoever. Um, yeah, granted, it's kind of a nasty bug based on my experience, but there's no point in freaking out. That doesn't help anything. But I'm back, trying to make some content, trying to enlighten a lot of you in this episode. I'm going to talk about what is a personality disorder. I'm going to talk about what this is and what this means. Personality disorders, to me, are like severe advanced cases of mental illness. Most people, the vast majority of people do not understand what a personality disorder actually is, what it means, what's going on with these folks. I'm going to try and lay it out, try to spread some awareness and build some education around this problematic issue that has to do with what I believe is an ever growing number of human beings. A lot, like, honestly, I feel like with each passing day, I'm seeing more and more and more personality disorder type behavior. And not even necessarily because people are kind of forming it naturally, like which a lot of people do, but it's almost like society is starting to, or has started to at least, adopt a lot of the ideals or ideology, and elevating ideas that advance mental illness. I was just watching a video on YouTube where an individual was saying that they could not face the truth. It would not do good for their mental health. So they were choosing deliberately to be in denial. And I was like, oh man, that is exactly how you become mentally ill. That's exactly how you generate a personality disorder. That's exactly how you become more narcissistic. But let's get into this, okay? What is a personality disorder? I mean, at first you kind of have to ask, right? What is a personality? What does personality mean, right? It's your identity. It's your sense of self. It's, the dilemma or the idea or the philosophy, the debate around the self has been ongoing for a long time. And to me, as I have worked on myself and developed a sense of self and created more of a sense of self, it's really something you have to experience. It's easier to experience than it is to describe what it means to have a sense of self or an identity, excuse me. But let's get into this, okay? Looking at my notes here. One thing that what I think is really interesting about personality disorders and why most of us feel lost when we're trying to understand a person with a personality disorder is that I've really come to the conclusion that a personality disorder seems to be like an entirely different psychology. Like there's this type of psychology and then there's this type of psychology. And really, I believe that one of the reasons why personality disorders are so difficult to treat and why the mental health industry has done such a lousy job of treating them is that it does not regard a personality disorder as like a different psychology. And let me give this metaphor. Like in physics, right? It's generally understood and given that in physics there's Newtonian physics, which is the physics that we're all familiar with, right? It's like what goes up must come down. Two objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time, etc. Right? The laws of physics that can't be broken, that they're always true. And yet, when scientists started looking really closely at things about with matter, what matter was made out of, and all kinds of things, they realized that it's not that straightforward. So they developed a different type of physics called quantum physics that just has kind of a different set of rules. And so to me, a personality disorder is sort of like this. There's regular you and me psychology, and then there's personality disorder psychology. I've often wondered, like, if UFOs landed, okay, and some space aliens came out, right, and they started to dwell among us and live among us and integrate with our society, would we be able to give them therapy? Would therapy be effective for them? Would I be able to give a space alien therapy? Probably not, right? Because their minds are different. They're wired different. Their brains, their minds probably operate differently. They have a different psychology. And I believe this to be essentially true with a personality disorder, with like borderline personality disorder. They are misunderstood. We don't understand it. I think this is one of the reasons why we are unable to treat it, is because we don't fully understand it. It's a different psychology. And so if you attempt to take your psychology and your mental framework and how you perceive the world and that framework of your perception of behavior and choices and actions and attempt to apply it to those individuals, you're just going to be really confused and frustrated and probably wonder if you're the crazy one and question yourself, question your sanity, and foster a whole bunch of self-doubt, et cetera, right? And so I really like, this is probably one of the number one things that I try to tell people. Like sometimes I'll get a client, they'll be like, what's a personality disorder? I'm like, oh, how much time we got? There's a lot to explain. There's a lot of questions. By the way, if you do have questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I will do my best to get them. I love audience feedback. I love audience viewer questions. So if you have any additional questions on any of this, please ask. Please ask, because I like responding to questions. But moving on, personality disorders are generally based in trauma, that there is always some fairly significant trauma. More so the type of trauma that, because like there's a type of trauma that I feel like is physically traumatic and therefore has a reflection on the mental part, right? Like if you you went to war and you get some PTSD, that physical trauma is going to translate to to therefore like psychological trauma, right? To me, there's another trauma that the opposite is true, that the impact is primarily on the development of self, the development of personality, the development of identity first, and then it manifests outwardly. Like one goes outside in, the other goes inside out. Okay. And so now a lot of people with personality disorders, they have both, right? They just have both. And that's just because you have trauma as a child doesn't mean you're going to grow up to have a personality disorder, right? There's something different there. And so it's usually trauma based. What happens is the impact that it has on your psyche has a tendency to fracture it, fragment it, creates a fissure, break you into pieces, right? It's almost like your identity, your personality, your sense of self is in fragments. It's in pieces. And this is why we generally see them act like different people moment to moment or day to day or whatever. Like one day they act this way, and the next day they act this way, and they just seem like entirely different people in each occurrence. Okay, and the reason being is because their personality is in fragments. It's fragmented. It's like smashed into pieces. Okay, and so because the personality or their identity or their sense of self is in these fragments, is in these pieces, there is no formation of identity. Again, to me, one of the most important things to understand about a personality disorder, it's an identity disturbance, meaning that there is a disturbance in self, identity, personality, etc. Okay, and so there's no sense of self, there's no sense of identity. Like a person with a personality disorder, it's like they can't function without that interaction with other people. Like someone mentioned this to me once. He said he felt like, based on what he knew, and I think there's some accuracy to it, like if you took someone with BPD or borderline personality disorder and you completely secluded them from 100%, and they were on their own, they were completely on their own, they would no longer have a mental illness, because the mental illness exists within how they interact with other people. And part of me wonders what would happen to them. I would imagine that they would deteriorate more into psychosis. But at the same time, it's like, I'd be curious to know what their mind would do if they didn't have other people to externalize. Like their whole experience is an external one. This is what I mean by it's a different psychology. Like the regular yous and me's, if we're looking inwardly, if we're practicing our insight, if we're practicing our awareness, and we're conscientious about it, this is the thing that I talk about constantly, we're going to have a different form of identity and a different psychology than somebody who has a personality disorder. We are inwardly focused. They are outwardly focused. They don't know how to be inwardly focused. That's the big part of the problem. They don't know how to self-reflect. It's painful for them. It's really, really painful for them. So again, this fragmented personality, it results in no sense of self, no formation of identity. Okay. And it's really what keeps them sick, what keeps them really mentally ill, is that they, hang on, look at my notes here. They practice, like they foster, like almost deliberately, denial and avoidance. They refuse to look at the things like personally, inwardly, that will help them solve their dilemma. They refuse to do it. It's terrifying. It's hard. It's painful for them. And so narcissism, borderline, these are personality disorders that are based around a lot of avoidance. They don't want to look at anything that makes them emotionally uncomfortable. As the saying goes, if you avoid pain, you're guaranteed to be miserable. This is a mental illness that is the definition of this. They avoid everything pain that leads and results in for them to have a lot of misery. Okay, and but what you have to understand too, there's no ego strength. They never develop what we might call ego strength. They are unable to validate themselves. They're unable to generate or practice their own sense of validation, their own soothing. They're 100% external based. Okay, they are unable to connect to anything inwardly, to self-soothe, to see value within themselves, to even like have a normal interaction with themselves. And I seriously sometimes wish that I could spend like a couple of hours just listening to their thoughts, just being in their heads and feeling their emotions. I think it would teach me a lot about it, because again, it's a different world. And so I mean, these are sort of the nuts and bolts. This is just a quick blanket umbrella overview of what a personality disorder is. When I talk about like avoidance and denial, right? BPD, they're avoidant of abandonment or rejection, right? It doesn't even matter necessarily how bad your relationship is with them. If you leave them, you have betrayed them. You have abandoned them. And so their severe avoidance of that is what generates that outcome, right? Narcissists, by the way, what they avoid is vulnerability. What they don't want to experience is vulnerability. So they avoid and they're in denial of it. The last point that I'm going to make about personality disorders is that they're like almost entirely emotion based. There's very little logic or reason or anything that's sort of based in reality. What I'm noticing more and more about people these days, and just as a side note, it's really fascinating, if not troubling and disturbing, to watch our collective society deteriorate into this narcissistic. There's just this narcissistic disposition with our culture, and it's honestly, it scares the crap out of me. Where this goes, where this takes us, and where we're heading. But again, very, very, very emotionally based. They don't practice logic. They don't practice reason. It's all emotion, right? So whereas you and I might use our thoughts, and if you don't, you should be practicing and learning to utilize your thoughts to manage your emotions, right? For them, it's all just reacting emotionally to everything, right? And and we would hope to see them be a little bit more proactive, to try and soothe themselves, like borderline, for example. And yet, and in some ways they do try, but it's a disaster. Okay, but again, primarily emotion based. Okay, so again, these are just sort of some of the basic guidelines about what a personality disorder is. And to me, it's really fascinating. It's really interesting. Again, some of your questions, let me know what you want to know about a personality disorder. What doesn't make sense? What needs more explanation? Leave it in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe while you're here. That's just a very, very brief overview of what a personality disorder is, why it happens, why people have it, what exacerbates it, and what makes it worse. Okay? Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.